Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Alex here, and we are just about to enter a new limited format, so we're going to talk about that today. The full Streets of New Capenna spoiler came out today. I took a long look at it, took a few hours, put together some notes, some thoughts that I want to share with you today. We're just going to go over some initial impressions. This isn't going to be too much of a deep dive, but I just want to talk a little bit about the set structure, how to draft a 3-color set, some things that stick out, some cards that stick out to me. Just kind of to get the ball rolling, just get some conversation flowing on the format. I want to get to everybody here just a bit more acquainted with the sets before we get into, the full-on set review season where we go deep dive on each of the individual cards and talk about those. By the way, if you're new here and you want more Streets of New Capenna and limited Magic content, I do have a podcast, Limited Level Ups, where I'll be posting a full set breakdown, a full deep dive on the set, and then, as the weeks go on, just the format updates, talking about the best archetypes, talking about top cards, talking about how to draft the set, all that good stuff. On this channel, I post a lot of those. I also post draft videos if you want those. And coming up next week, so the week of the 17th, I think April 17th and 18th, I'll be doing my set review with Ethan, Lord Tupperware from Lords Unlimited. That'll be on the podcast feed as well. You can find that anywhere you find podcasts. And on the Lords Unlimited YouTube channel. We're going to be streaming that to Twitch Monday and Tuesday of next week. So come check that out if you're interested. So yeah, if you're looking for some draft content, this is the place. The podcast feed is the place. Links to all that stuff is also in the description if you want to check that out. Anyways, let's just jump in. So for those who haven't, seen anything about this set, this is, Streets of New Capenna is a 3-color draft set. And that might be something that's completely new for a lot of people. Maybe you've only been playing Magic a year or two. We've had, I'd say, 3 or 4 full-on 3-color or multicolor draft sets in the past 10 years. But if you haven't been around for those, this is new to you, it can be a bit intimidating. There's a lot going on with these sets. If you haven't looked at all at this set, just to give you a bit of background flavor, it's a bunch of demon crime families focused in, they're all 3 colors each, blue, black, white, or blue, black, red. I've got all the leaders up on the screen here. So what I want to walk everybody through just quickly is talking about each of these families and the mechanics that go along with them, and a few thoughts on each of the mechanics as we get into it. Okay, let's start with our first crime family here, the CABARETTI. So their mechanic is Alliance, and it's a very simple mechanic. All it says is, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, something happens. For example, we have Witty Roastmaster here. This is 2 in a red for a 3/2 common. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, the Roastmaster deals a damage to each opponent. There's a twist on this mechanic on some of the cards. I think this is on uncommons and above, where the first time a creature enters the battlefield under your control, something happens. The second time it happens, so if you have 2 creatures under the battlefield under your control that turn, you get an additional bonus. So, for example, on this Rumor Gatherer here, 3 mana for a 2/1, when a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you scry 1, and if it's the second time that ability has resolved, you draw a card instead. So a little bit of an upgrade. Of note, the third time that happens, you're actually not going to get the upgrade. It's going to go back to the first one, the way it's worded. So it's a little bit strange, but that's the way it works. As far as deck building and drafting, of course, you're going to want high creature counts, 17, 18 creatures to make sure you're consistently triggering your alliance. You're going to want creatures that make multiple creatures when they come in. There's a few of those in the set. It's like a 3 mana 2/1 that comes with a 1/1. Token makers are awesome. The CABARETTI Charm has a mode where it makes 2 creatures. Instantly being able to get the second mode on your Rumor Gatherer, or triggering your Witty Roastmaster twice, that's awesome. There's also cards that do things like, they're the kind of like engine cards that generate multiple bodies. Sacrifice a treasure, you make a 1/1. Or when this card attacks, you make a token. All those kind of cards are just going to keep the wheels turning, make sure that you don't gas out in the mid-game. And by the way, I do want to say, I'm mostly speaking in generalities here. These are just the initial impressions. I'm sure we're going to get to the exact, details of exactly what these decks want, the exact kind of cards. But just some things to think about as you're going into the set, as you're evaluating some of the cards. That's really what I want to bring to everybody today. Just some tools for framing, and so that you can look at these cards in the set and go, oh, I understand kind of why they're here and why they slot into the set, or why certain effects, like, a card that generates multiple bodies would be important in this set. All right, next up, we've got the Riveteers. This is the green, black, red family. Their mechanic is Blitz. You're going to find this on creatures. The Blitz mechanic is an alternative casting cost on your creatures. Usually it's cheaper, sometimes it's more expensive. But what it says is, if you cast this card for its Blitz cost, it gains haste, and when the creature dies, you draw a card. So, for example, on the Strong Arm here, you're paying a cheaper cost. You get in some haste damage really quickly, but you have sacrificed the card at the end. You don't keep your board presence. You're okay on cards, right? You're still even on cards. You draw that card at the end, but you do lose some long-term board presence for some immediate damage, right? That's the trade-off there. A lot of these cards have death triggers or enter the battlefield triggers, right? So you got some synergy where it's like, okay, well, I'm trading off my creature. My creature's gonna die, but that's okay. It did something when it came in, or it's gonna do something when it dies. Compared to the last mechanic, Alliance, it's a little bit more tricky to, I think, see the full picture for this mechanic just by looking at the cards. I think it's very easy to understand, okay, I put these Alliance cards in my deck and some creatures in my deck. There's a little bit of hidden synergy that requires you to look at the set a little bit just to see all the moving pieces. Just to spell it out, there are cards in the set that care about when you sacrifice things, or cards in the set that want you to sacrifice things. So what's going to happen with these Blitz cards is you go, all right, I cast them for the Blitz cost, and then I sacrifice them at the end of turn to my cards that, I can sacrifice them to, or I have cards that care about me sacrificing stuff, and you get those bonuses automatically. So you can kind of assemble some engines or some things that are greater than the sum of their parts, rather than just, all right, Blitz card in attack, and draw my card, right? You can kind of set up more of a grindy kind of plan if you've got all those moving pieces. I think on face value, this is a aggressive archetype, where it's going to lean itself to an aggressive archetype, especially if you're just like, base red-black, can kind of be closer to 2 colors. But I do think there's also some room for, some grinding, some real Jund sacrifice kind of elements going on there. I think this is one that's going to be really interesting to explore, and it's not clear to me on face value exactly what the best build of this might be, without playing with the set. Next up, we've got the Maestros and their mechanic Casualty. So I was just talking about ways to sacrifice creatures, or reasons you might want to sacrifice creatures, and Casualty, lines up really nicely like that. So Casualty is a mechanic that you see on spells, and it'll be Casualty 1, Casualty 2, Casualty 3. And what it says is, as you cast this spell, you can sacrifice a creature with power of whatever the number is. And if you do, you get to copy the spell. So this works, of course, really well with the Blitz mechanic we just talked about. Also works with any token makers, with the Alliance mechanic we were talking about. This set, by the way, I should mention, is full of crossover synergies. There's just so many synergies between the families. It's not like, well, I'm black, red, blue, and I want exactly these cards. I think no matter what color combination you are, you're going to find cards in the pack that you want, because all of the mechanics actually do play pretty nicely together. And we're going to get into in a little bit just exactly what the crossovers between the mechanics are. But with this mechanic, I think it's pretty obvious what you want, right? It's just like, it's almost like Exploit if you played Crimson Vow, where you want sacrifice fodder, right? You want things that are good to, either good to sacrifice, do something on death, or already did something when they enter. There's a 2-mana 1/1 that enters and makes your opponent discard a card, kind of like Virus Beetle. And that's pretty good to sacrifice. So you want to load your deck up with cheap sacrifice fodder and, spells that have Casualty. Also, speaking of crossover synergies, there is a sub mechanic in this set that cares about having 5 different mana values of cards in your grave. Like, having a 1, a 2, a 4, and a 6, and a 7, or something like that. Casualty, of course, helps there too. You need a 5, you can sacrifice your 5. Maybe you don't want to sacrifice your 5-drop very much, but you can do that if that's what the game bans from you. Something I am keeping my eyes peeled for is just exactly the balance of fodder / casualty cards I want in my deck. I'm not exactly sure what that balance is going to be. Probably going to be something close to like 60-40 as ideal. 60 creatures, 60% creatures, 40% spells. You don't want to be stuck with a bunch of casualty cards in your hand, nothing to sacrifice. So just something I'm thinking about going forward as we get into the set a little bit more. Next up, we got the OBSCURA. So this is the white, black, and blue family, and their mechanic is Connive. So Connive is going to be on creatures, and it says, often you'll see something like Echo Inspector here. 4 mana, 2/3 flyer. It says when it enters the battlefield, it connives, which means you draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard a null card, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This mechanic's interesting compared to the previous mechanics we've looked like, because I think it's a little bit more like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a mechanical mechanic. It's less bombastic, exciting. It's more of a, okay, well, this helps the game go along. It helps me smooth out my draws. It's not like, ooh, I want to really build around this. It's more just like, well, I have a bunch of connive cards in my deck, and I'm going to be able to draw spells when I need them, draw lands when I need them, that kind of thing. That being said, I think it's a very good mechanic. I think this kind of filtering is fantastic. 1, just in general, making sure you had a good mix of lands and spells, but 2, in a 3-color set, and I think this is planted specifically, in a 3-color set, to go, hey, I can't cast this 3-color card just yet. I don't have all my mana, I don't have blue, black, and white mana, so let me discard it, try to hit my lands, try to hit a relevant spell that I can cast, something like that. I think Connive's going to be generally better on cheaper creatures rather than expensive creatures like this Echo Inspector. It's not going to be bad, but being able to filter that early draw, being able to keep maybe a slightly sketchier hand, being able to, like I was saying, get to your mana that you need early to help the game start going, I think is a lot better. And, later on, you don't really want to be pitching spells, so your Echo Inspector is going to be a 2/3, but that's okay, because that means you're going to be discarding a land. So it's got some value there as well, but I do think that, on average, the cheaper ones are better so they can filter your early draws. And I think this mechanic's going to be really interesting just from like a play pattern, and I think it's going to be skill testing in a way, because if I think about Neon Dynasty, I think about the modern age, a thing I heard a lot about that card is, man, I never knew how to use that card properly. I never knew when I was supposed to pitch lands. I never knew when I was supposed to, pitch spells. I never knew when I was supposed to play it on 2, hold it a little bit. I think Kanai's got a little bit that going on a little bit too. And it's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it like a spiky mechanic in a sense, but you know what it kind of is, where it's not like, Chimmy comes along and goes, whoa, cool, Kanai, if I can draw some cards and put some counters on my creatures if I, discard the right thing at the right time. But I think Spike is really going to like this. The really players who want to get all the small edges out of their game. Be like, I know exactly what to discard here. I know exactly that I can't make my Echo Inspector a 2/3. I need to discard a land here instead, or I need to make my Raffin's Informant a 3/2 here instead of, pitching a land. I need to pitch a spell here. I think all that's going to be really interesting and really skill testing. Some really interesting conversations around land counts in these decks, and this is getting into more of the deeper minutia of how these decks are actually going to play out, and we'll figure this out later, but I thought it'd be interesting just to kind of talk about it here. Maybe we want to build these decks as 19 land decks, because, hey, you just want to cast your spells because you have a lot of ways to loot away extra lands, right? Then maybe you're playing some undercosted creatures. You cast your 2/1, loot away a land. It just saves a 2-mana 2/1. That's not the worst deal in the world. Or maybe you want to build it the opposite way, where it's like you really want to get that counter on your creature. You want to get that 3/4 flyer for 4. You want to get that 3/2 flyer, or 3/2 for 2. So that means, okay, well, I'm going to play fewer lands, and because I'm looting away spells, then I'm going to be able to, still hit my land drop. So unsure exactly where that lies. I would imagine it's not going to have that much effect on your deck building. I think it's going to, on balance, probably not affect your land count that much. Just like there's also some thoughts to, you can kind of put some more situational cards in your deck where it's like, oh, if I draw this, I can just loot it away. There was that kind of conversation going on with the blood mechanic in Crimson Vow, right? And I think we ended up not putting situational cards in our deck very often. We just kind of went, well, we'll discard our lands when we accrue them. We don't want to put bad cards in our deck. We'll just, wait to discard our lands on turn 5 or 6. That's going to be a little bit different in this set because, you can't choose to hold your Connive on your 2-drop until turn 5. I mean, you can hold your Connive 2-drop, but I think you're going to want to play out your 2-drop when you play your 2-drop. So I'm not exactly sure what implications it has on deck building just yet, but I imagine you're not going to change your land count all that much. I'm very happy to be wrong on that, though. All right, and our last family here is the Brokers. And the Brokers are the blue, white, green family. And they got a really interesting mechanic. This one's one of the cooler ones, in my opinion, shield counters. So sometimes you've got creatures that enter with shield counters, or you have creatures like Broker's Veteran that put a shield counter on something else, or even spells that grant shield counters to things. And what the shield counters do is they say, if damage would be dealt to this creature, or the creature would be destroyed, you remove the shield counter. So it's a little bit of protection, right? And the interesting thing about this is it's not so much like a 2-for-1. It's like a pseudo 2-for-1 a little bit. Because you think in your mind when you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, well, they have to kill my creature twice, or it has to trade in combat twice. This is true to some extent, but there's a bit of a caveat there, where it says if damage will be dealt to this creature, you remove the shield counter. So, say you have a 2-mana 2/2 with a shield counter, right? And your opponent has a 1/3. Well, you attack into their 1/3, they can just block your 2/2, and the shield counter goes away. So, low power, high toughness creatures are kind of a bit of a foil to these shield counters, right? It's not just well, you gotta kill this once and then I get to kill it again. There's some workarounds. There's also quite a few removal spells in this set, and I think this is purposeful, that are designed to get around the shield counters. So they are, pacifism effects, enchantment-based removal spells, or they're things that put creatures on top of libraries, things that don't directly destroy them to get around the shield counters. It's gonna be a nuisance in combat still. I'm not trying to downplay how good these are, because I think they are actually really quite powerful and will be really obnoxious in some games. You're like, oh wow, I have to make some totally awful blocks, or some totally awful, I have to cast this spell at this really inopportune time just because my opponent has a shield counter on their creature. Still gonna be very powerful, but there are some ways where it's not just gonna be like, a bunch of hexproof creatures or something running out of common, or it's not gonna feel like that anyways. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and from a design perspective, I think they did a really good job of this, is they made it so a lot of these shield counter creatures are good at attacking and not as good at blocking, or at least they have something on them that wants them to attack. It says when this creature attacks, you do something, so that you're not, you're not incentivized to just turtle up. You're not incentivized to just be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna play all these blockers. You actually want to get full value out of your card, and when you attack, give your creatures +1/+1, or whatever the card is that it says, right? I think this is a design lesson that they learned from. I think the first time I heard about this was Ulamog's Crusher, which is this gigantic 8/8. Eldrazi creature. It has Annihilator 2, which means when you attack with it, your opponent has to sacrifice 2 things. But in testing, people just weren't attacking with it. They're like, I just want to block with my 8/8. I feel very, very safe with my large creature here. And so to fix that, they made you attack. They put a clause that said this creature has to attack each turn. And I think they've done that a little bit with these shield counters too. There's also things that care about, removing counters from a creature for some sort of ability. I think those are sparse. I think mainly this family or these cards do just care about inherently, you get a shield counter, that's a good thing. There's not going to be like so much of a shield counter deck where I'm building around it. It's just going to be, an inherently good thing that goes in your creatures. Okay, so the most common question that I've gotten leading up to this set, and one of the reasons I really wanted to make this video, is how do you draft a 3-color set? Like I said, there's a lot of people who haven't experienced this before. It's their first 3-color set. What do I do? How do you, where do you prioritize the gold cards? Where do you prioritize fixing? How do you choose what lane to get into? And I'm going to try to break it down a little bit. Again, this is pre-draft. This is just based on, my past experience with multicolored sets. I've drafted a lot of multicolored sets in the past, and my past or my current experience of looking at the set and just seeing mechanically how they laid it all out. So big picture here, you're going to be drafting allied color pairs to start with. If you've been in tune with, content creators and maybe some talk on Reddit or Twitter or Discord, this is probably not a new concept to you when looking at this set. But for those who have not heard, this big picture idea, I do want to get into it a little bit. So if you go back here and you look at this, this is the back of a Magic card. If you turn around a Magic card, this is what you see on the back, the symbols in this order. This set, what it's doing is it is color pairs or 3-color groups that are what we call shards, from Shards of Alara, or I guess arcs is another word for it. So if you follow along here, it's green, white, blue, black, red, green, right? It's all connecting here. We had Konzatark here 10 years ago at this point, which is crazy that it was that long ago, where instead it was wedges. So it was like red, white, black, blue, green, right? In this set, it's this way, where it's like green, white, blue. And what that means is you're going to want to start in one of these 2 allied color pairs here. Blue-black, or red-black, or white-green, or red-green. The reason being, it's more flexible that way. Because if you start red and green, you move into red-green-white, or red-green-black, right? But if you start in, let's say, red-white, well, you only have one family you can be in, right? White, green, red. That's the only thing you can be doing. And maybe there's like 4-color, 5-color decks in the format. I'm sure there will be. But as far as just like staying in the families, you're going to want to start in what we call these allied color pairs, these colors that are touching on the back of a Magic card. As the draft goes on, as you get past, maybe you start red-black and you get past a lot of the Maestros cards, right? The red, black, blue cards. You go, okay, I can move in here. But as far as flexibility in the draft goes, you really want to start in one of those 2-color pairs. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. Red-black is sacrifice, right? We've got this body dropper, Forge Master, Fail Grudge, a lot of things that care about fast sacrifice. And if you think about the 2 families that have red and black in them, the Riveteers with Blitz and Maestros with Casualty also care about sacrifice, right? So you start here, and no matter which family you end up in, one of those 2, your cards are going to play well in that deck, right? Next up, we've got Blue-Black Graveyard. So, like I was talking a little bit about this before, this cares about having 5 different mana values among cards in your grave. For example, we've got Tainted Indulgence. This is blue-black for an instant, draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your grave. So if you get that boat, you get that, that can get to an addition of 5 cards in the grave, you get to draw 2 cards, you get a little bit of an additional bonus. And of course, if we think about the families that touch blue-black, we've got the Maestros and we've got the Obscura. They both help that, right? Obscura, you can loot away some stuff with the Connive mechanic, be able to put different mana values in your graveyard. And of course, the Maestros, well, you care about sacrificing, so that's another way to get things in the grave. Next up, we got blue-white, and it's sort of got a counter theme. I mean, that's what it says on the package here, right? That it's counters. All these cards care about counters. I think really it's going to be like a blue-white flyer deck that kind of cares about some counters. If you think about the 2 families, we've got the Brokers, those the shield counters, of course, and we've got the Obscura, which have +1/+1 counters. So again, there's the crossover there. Next up, we've got green-white citizens. So this is a tribal archetype. They care about citizen creature types. It's pretty straightforward. They want to make it a lot of small creatures. Of course, that plays well with the Cabaretti's Creature Fall or Alliance mechanic, and it sort of plays well with shield counters. I mean, the idea here, I guess, is you've got a lot of creatures and you can put counters on your shield creatures or sturdy counters on your creatures. I don't know, that one's a bit looser, I gotta say. They're not all perfect, but I think that's the idea there. And the last one here, I think it's actually the loosest of the bunch. It's green-red treasures, and this is the the Riveteers and the Cabaretti. And so I think there's some synergy where it's like, okay, some cards care about sacrifice, so when you sacrifice treasures, you get those bonuses. There's a stimulus package here, which is kind of a nice little crossover for the Cabaretti decks, where it's like, you sacrifice a treasure, maybe you've accrued a bunch of treasures over the course of the game, you can sacrifice those, make citizens. So this one card does have a nice little crossover, but there's not a ton. I think more this is just a mana smoothing mechanic, kind of like Connive is in the Obscura. This is just kind of smooth you a little bit. I guess there is some space, and there are some cards that actually want you to play 5 colors. Very, very few of them, but you can, if you're green-red base with treasures, you can cast your multicolor cards. Maybe this is a good base for 4 or 5 color good stuff like that. There's a card that has this 5 color activation, so maybe the idea there is you get a bunch of treasures and you can activate your 5 color card. I think it draws 3 cards or something like that. So yeah, this is the loosest of them. But basically, for all of these color pairs, again, I just want to reiterate, you want to start here so you have the flexibility to move into either of the adjacent families. It's not great to, well, no, one, it's not great to start in an enemy color pair, but also I would, unless the 3 color card is very, very powerful, I probably wouldn't take a 3 color card early on. You want to stick to those 2 color cards or monocolor cards if you can. Again, there's gonna be drafts, and I'm sure there's going to, as the format develops, we're gonna be facing and playing with 4 or 5 color decks. The fixing exists to do that, but just to keep it simple, I think as we're exploring the set, that's kind of how you want to think about it. And of course, the mana fixing, right? We want to look at what mana fixing do we have when you are drafting multicolor decks. So we've got these tri-lands at rare. You're not going to see those a lot. We've got a cycle of 5 lands in the allied color pairs. Skybridge Towers, for example, enters tapped and adds either blue or white. You can sacrifice it to draw a card, which I think is worse than the Strixhaven campuses, by the way. By the time you want to be activating that ability, you would prefer to be able to scry a bunch of times rather than just draw up once, I think. But it's still good, you're still going to take this. And these like weird evolving wild variants, the Riveteers Outlook, it enters the battlefield and you can sacrifice it for either a swamp, mountain, or forest, for this one in particular. Put it on the battlefield tapped, then you shuffle and gain a life. There's one of these for each family. It's like a evolving wilds that only goes and gets the specific land of the family's colors. And, as a little bonus for not being able to get the other 2 colors, you gain life on top of that. And I guess a little bit of a bonus there, too, where it's like, in the Riveteer one specifically, or maybe, the Maestro one, too, the ones that are touching red and black, there might be the cards, that care about sacrificing. You make a little bit of a bonus there, which is kind of funny. We've also got some, some other auxiliary things. We've got treasures, of course, that fix. We've got something like Ominous Parcel, kind of these, like, fixing artifacts we see in some sets. We've got this cycle of 3 color cards that have this weird ability where you can, like, discard them from your hand or exile from your hand, and then one of your land is able to produce a bunch of different mana, or whatever color of mana from the family that you're playing there. So that's cool. There, like, I think the idea is they really, really want you to be able to cast all your cards. There's a lot of fixing in the set. That being said, there is a divide between the good fixing, I would say these lands, and the kind of medium fixing like these cards. Well, Jewel Thief isn't medium fixing. That card's very, very good. But the kind of like secondary kinds of fixing, I think, if you want to prioritize fixing early, which you should, take these lands in like the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 range, I would say. You want to be taking the lands rather than taking something like Rakish Revelers or Ominous Parcel. These are the premium ones. And of course, I was advocating for staying in 2 colors, but there's a lot of the power in this set is in the 3 color cards. I say the majority of the power, actually. So while you don't want to start there, you do really want to make your way into one of these 3 color families, because if you don't, you're just missing out on a lot of power. Back in Konzatark here, there were 2 color decks that existed. Streamlined 2 color decks, aggressive decks that really looked to punish people that are playing a bunch of tap lands. And I think there's room for that too, for sure. But I do think that eventually you want to move your way into 3 colors. I will say as well, though, as a caveat, when I say 3 colors, I don't mean straight 3 colors. I don't mean like just 6 mountains, 6 forests, and 6 swamps, or some dual lands in there too. You mostly still want to stick with your base 2 colors and a splash for for example, a crew captain and Mr. Orfeo the Boulder. You're playing a few powerful cards of 3 colors, not just your entire deck is a bunch of, multicolor cards because it's just hard to make that mana base work, is what it comes down to. But the commons in the set, I think, as a whole are kind of weak, so you really do want to find the open family so you get rewarded with these powerful gold cards. I think that's one of the main goals as you're drafting. All right, some finishing thoughts here, just to close this out. the removal, they kind of did a bait and switch with this. So the first removal spells we saw were Strangle and Murder, which are two very good removal spells. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe the removal is going to be pretty good in this set. And then as the full set came out, this is some of the worst removal we've seen in a long time. Now, I've maybe cherry picked here a little bit, but I don't think I'm not trying to paint a picture here that does not exist. I do think these removal spells are for the most part representative of the common removal spells that you see in this set. Like Deal Gone Bad, 4 mana instant, -3/-3 until end of turn. Oof, that's really tough. I mean, it's got the mill clause in there too, but that's just like really bad rate for your removal spell. Buy Your Silence, 5 mana, exile something. The opponent creates a treasure token. That one's really tough too. Or I guess it's controller. So really, if you needed it for really bad fixing, you can do that. Ready to Rumble, 5 mana, deal 5. I mean, these cards aren't terrible, but they're super clunky. So it's gonna be interesting to see how this pans out. I think the removal is this way so that you don't take a bunch of removal early. They want you to take the cool, powerful multicolored cards. That's the idea. They don't want you to just be like an all removal deck where you're skimping on the cool flashy cards that they actually want you to draft. Yeah, we'll see what kind of effect this has in the format. Generally, when the removal is clunky, I mean, the aggressive decks have a bit more, a better time, really. They are able to get under your opponent and not get hit by, like, a 2-mana removal spell all that often. Although, maybe your opponent has a deck full of Strangles and Murders. That will still happen. Yeah, it's very just a stark contrast from what we've seen lately in the past year or two of sets where the removal, for the most part, has been pretty darn good. And then last thing I just want to say is I just want to point at these two, and I'm sure if you paid any attention at all to this set being released, You'll have noted these two BUSTO absolutely brutal commons, Jewel Thief and Inspiring Overseer. These are just, man, they read like uncommons, and I mean, I'm sure these are going to be some of the top performing cards in the entire set. Both of these cards are just out of this world fantastic. Inspiring Overseer is just a better version of Cloud Concealer, which we've seen, we saw in M20, I believe, and was a great card. Jewel Thief, 3 mana 3/3 Vigilance Trample. Like, hey, I hate a 3 mana 3/3 as much as the next limited zoomer out there, but 3 mana 3/3 Trample Vigilance, make a treasure token, that's just so much. So yeah, these two cards, it's really strange. I'm not exactly sure their design intent with these, like where all the other commons in the set or the monocolor commons are kind of dorky, and then there's just these two as extreme outliers. I'm not sure what's up with that. Maybe they just wanted some really powerful monocolored cards so people wouldn't be intimidated early on in the draft. They could be safe being like, I know this card's good. I don't have to mess around with the multicolored cards early. So I'm not exactly sure, but just note, these cards are busted. These cards are great. And yeah, I'm sure I'm not going to have to convince you much further that you need to draft these cards. And that's all I have to say for today. So as I said, if you enjoy this, there's going to be tons of content on both this channel, on the Limited Level-Ups podcast feed. I also stream on Twitch if you want to check that out. I stream daily. I do this as my full-time gig. I'm a full-time Magic content creator. Check it out. I am there every weekday, 3 o'clock Eastern, if you want to come hang out. And yeah, if you'd like, if you have any suggestions for other content you'd like to see in regards to the set in the next 2 weeks or so before the set comes out, or even after the set comes out, please let me know. I'm going to be posting draft videos here pretty regularly, maybe once every other day, or maybe even daily if we can get up to that. But thank you for hanging out. I just want to say, lastly, if you want to check out the content links, there's more stuff in the description. Links to the Twitch, links to the podcast feeds, links to the Patreon if you want to support my content, what's going on here on the YouTube and all those other places. That's the best place to go. And thank you so much. Drop a follow, drop us a like, drop a subscribe if you're new here. And yeah, we'll see you around.